Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhodes on the Buy Here Pay Here morning show. Take it away, you two.
Good morning.
Hello. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We always encourage everyone to shout out where you're from. Weather is optional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be like 55 degrees.
We don't watch the news, so if you're freezing, we like to hear about it. Hey, George, if you're 80 degrees in Florida, we don't want to hear about that. But
I know.
But you know how that is.
Yeah.
Good morning.
I'm still a little bit. Part of my heart is left in Florida.
Yeah.
And so looking forward to visit and being able to go back and spend a little bit more lengths of time.
Yeah.
So it's Friday.
Yeah.
And that's we have a kind of a different topic we're going to be talking about today, but
something new.
Yeah, but the announcements, we've got the webinar on Tuesday
night.
And you can go to BHPHNationTV.com and get the links for registering for that. And so, feel free to log on to that. And we also sent out our sponsor ad package for the year for Buy Here Pay Here Nation TV yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't get one, we're so sorry. Let us know and we'll get one sent to you. And so you can kind of take a peek at what it is that we're doing. And yeah.
Yeah, we've had people at the conferences will come up and talk to us, and not folks that we know well, but are kind of catching up to what we're doing, especially on the morning show. And so, some people have said, we'd love to sponsor some of what you're doing, and we're trying to make sure we remembered everybody who's kind of made that request. Because we mostly send it to the folks that we talk to regularly, of course. But we hope to get folks involved in what we're doing with Nation TV. And I think today with the morning show, we're kind of stepping into something new. We obviously use real world examples from our travels from time to time. It's just a natural part of what we do in consulting and coaching or telling the stories. But
the names and identities are like
withheld.
Yeah.
But so it's like, what was that old show about? Names have been withheld to protect the innocent or something.
I don't remember.
It was an old TV show.
An old TV show.
Anyway, as we were contemplating the topic here, we were thinking, well, can we do this? I mean, can we really tell a full story in detail without accidentally revealing the names of the parties involved? We've actually chosen fake names here so we can.
But I mean, it's the reason is, though, I mean, we obviously don't want to call out or whatever people, but they're really real relevant situations, real relevant things that we see happen and the things that we've seen happen in multiple places. Cause Jim wrote down like one of the scenarios, and he kept the name out, and he's like, can you tell who this is? And I was like, this person, no. This person, no. Really? We've had that many people have had this scenario happen before, and they've all ended the same. So
there's definitely some common themes. I think one of the things we're going to talk about today will definitely be a theme that comes up from time to time. And in recording a podcast with Brent Carmichael a while back on why dealerships fail, I kind of recounted for him, I just said, Brent, based on my experience, there are kind of two things in particular that I find that if we can get those two things right, that we mitigate a lot of the risk that is Buy Here, Pay Here.
Yeah.
And he said, same for me. Like I do a workshop on these same things, and these are the two things we talk about. So it just tells you that, when you travel like we do, and you see the stories, and you see the I'm going to call them mistakes, because that's one of the things that happens in this is that we see some things that they're painful mistakes. And so this is a story of one that was definitely painful for the parties involved. And so it's just one of those things where when you travel and you do what we do and you get inside that stuff and you witness those things, you try obviously as an advisor or coach to bring those things to others and help them, mitigate risk and guard against the hazards that can be any business, but certainly in Buy Here, Pay Here, we have a unique set of challenges. And so we're just trying
Yeah.
to help folks understand how to, protect against that. So
Yeah. Okay. So should
the
we?
story.
Yeah, the story. I'm going to let Jim tell it.
Yeah. So I'll kind of back up and tell you that. I heard from somebody years ago who'd read some of my articles, and they said, look, I've had a business fail, and I saw your articles, and you teach some real fundamentals, and I would love to have you come and help us get a business started. Well, by us, he meant this investor that he'd reached out to. And the investor basically said, I'll be interested in looking at investment. I've made good money in subprime auto in the past. I'd be interested in getting involved in starting a dealership, but I think we need to find a coach and get some structure and some of that kind of stuff in there.
Which good.
Yeah.
Check mark in the, trying to get some help making sure that all the boxes are checked and all that.
So we're calling the investor Jason.
Okay.
So Jason is the one who said, let's find a coach and let's get some structure, and I'll be happy to get involved. So I met them both. We ended up agreeing to step into business and helped them kind of coach them up on what we call a startup package or launch package, got them going. And then the manager, who we're calling David.
Is David the one that initially reached out to
David's the one who had originally approached me and said, I've had businesses fail. I want to make sure I like what you teach fundamentally, and I want to stick to the fundamentals, and I want to just do business this way. And I said, cool, happy to help. And we stepped in and we got them up and going. And I mean, they hadn't been in business but a few weeks, and David proceeds to just fall right back into old habits, super aggressive, no underwriting, no written policies, just going, aggressive. And so that whole thing about, everybody's approved. If it can fog a mirror, they're approved. And while we've seen that business model work for some, that was not what this investor signed up for. And it's not what I would be recommending. Like, it's not typically necessary. There are other ways to conduct business and have it work out well. So it's not what we're recommending. Anyway, this guy, David, just kind of took off with the business.
And you said that he'd had a business that hadn't done well in Buy Here, Pay Here?
Yeah. It was also in Buy Here, Pay Here.
So had done a Buy Here, Pay Here business before, hadn't done well, shut the doors.
Right.
Or did he own the Buy Here, Pay Here business?
He was at least a partner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So had a financial risk in it with the original. Shut the doors. Did you ever get into the why he shut the doors?
Later. I mean, details kind of trickled down to me, and some of that stuff I learned after the fact, like as I meet people who knew the story, and we learned some of those things later. But really, I think the key was that it was just about being aggressive. Like, we meet people who they bring a certain amount of ego to the business. And that's something else that Brent and I talked about in that same podcast. We have a podcast out there. Brent and I did one called Why Dealers Fail. Oh, yeah. And so when Brent and I talked about that, we basically said, I brought the idea of ego because I realized, look, these are our clients that we work with, and, they're independent by choice, right? They're mavericks, renegades often. Part of why they have success in the used car business is because of that ego and attitude that drives them. One of the things we see in Buy Here, Pay Here that's a little different is if we bring ego, and especially if that ego is driven by outselling everyone.
I want to be better. I want to do better. I want to be the number one. I want to all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. It's based on profit, volume, gross. So it's that kind of ego driven thing. And so that happens. We see that with people who are coming out of independent retail in particular. We're introducing
those are their drivers anyway. Is units, sell.
Yeah. And it's appropriate. In that industry, one of the things that happens that's different in Buy Here, Pay Here, and this was an example, we saw that thing get ugly pretty fast with this dealership in Middle America. We're saying is where this dealership is. And, they basically just took off, the manager took off with the business, no real ground rules. And they really just made a mess of it. And then,
so did Jason, the passive investor, think everything was okay because you were part of the?
No, I mean, no, it was understood about what we provided, what we didn't provide. Right. I mean, so there were reports, obviously the system, the software produces certain reports. I'm never involved in the check writing side of a business with a client. I mean, that's just not part of the service that we provide. So I'm really kind of operational front end. We're looking at the data that's coming out of the DMS. We're often helping to compile the reports that go, in this case, to both the manager and the dealer, or the investor rather.
Investor.
Yeah. And so that's part of what happens there is, you're providing those reports. But early in buy here, pay here, when you're kind of in this honeymoon period, everything looks rosy. You're selling lots of cars, gross profit looks good. Maybe the ratios on the sales look fine. It's not until we get out of the honeymoon period, we start to experience delinquency. You start to see the repos coming from this aggressive underwriting. And now it gets more challenging because it starts to consume our day, with all the repos and the work that comes with that. And so the bottom line is the reports looked okay.
And
For
during
a
that
time.
honeymoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. For a time.
Right.
Okay.
For a time. And then when the wheels start to come off or it starts to get more difficult, then, one of the things that you have to guard against, and one of the things that we just learned in this is that there are definitely ways to introduce capital into buy here, pay here with a short set of limitations. And if you watch the major capital providers in this space who provide lines of credit, they're careful to put those limitations in place.
Well, and that's that kind of goes to that thing that you were talking about with that you've talked to Brent Carmichael during some of those podcasts, is that there's two structures that you really have to get right. One is the structure of the deal with the consumer.
Yeah, and you've got some latitude there. When I say right, within a certain bumpers.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other, or it's important that you structure them well.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is how you introduce capital into the actual dealership.
That's right. Yep.
And that's the other. That's
and you've heard me talk
structure
about that with
so many
clients.
times, and it's enough that as I've heard Jim talk about this to people that are capital providers, to people that are like Brent Carmichael, who are coaches and consultants, and they're like ding 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 ding.
Sure.
That if you follow that model,
right.
or that they get it. It's like, yes, that will mitigate a lot of problems if you get this introducing capital piece.
That would have solved a lot of the
properly.
problems that you're going to hear me describe. There's more to this story. Like this dealer, this manager just hired, took the same approach to hiring as he did to approving loans. Just hired anybody who walked in and showed up and wanted the job, they put them on the sales team or inventory team, whatever. And so you had this really loose ship. They had really virtually no written procedures or didn't follow any of the stuff that we'd kind of provided a framework.
Just kind of figure it out.
And they just, they were just kind of winging it, flying by the seat of their pants and just, approving everybody and just, turning out the cars. And so that feels good in the moment. You feel like you're doing something good. You feel like you're creating a business or building a business, but wow, it just was a mess. It got to be a train wreck really fast. And what's worse is, once the numbers start to get poor and then there was also
after the honeymoon period.
Yeah. And now it's getting difficult. It's getting weird. The charge-offs are high. The investor's probably asking questions. And now the manager's becoming less and less available. The manager, David, in this case, is suddenly just not at the dealership as much, like gone an awful lot, claiming to be gone to auctions, but, gone for hours at a time. So there was a whole thing going on in David's personal life too, that affected this. So that can happen. And so all the more reason you got to guard against this stuff, but there ended up being embezzlement, and so here's David who, and the part I didn't tell is that these two gentlemen had known each other since grade school. They'd been friends for most of their life.
So there's a level of trust,
I suppose. I don't know what the nature of the relationship was there, but certainly the fact that the investor, this wealthy investor agreed to put money in the business, suggested some level of trust anyway. But then I was brought in, as the consultant that they both knew, I was brought in to assess the situation. And I was in there, discovering lots of operational problems. But in the course of doing that, I also discovered some clear evidence of outright theft, embezzlement. So I brought that to the attention of the investor partner, and ultimately it went to the courthouse and went to the criminal route. They actually filed charges against the guy, and so it was, it got really ugly. In the course of doing that, the investor partner asked me, because he didn't know the business. He was a passive investor. He had limited understanding of it. And he asked me to step in and help kind of turn it around and get some people in there. And so I did. I stepped in and was actively involved. We completely overhauled the business. I mean,
Mhm.
definitely, put in systems and hired, ended up putting all new people in. By the time it was all said and done, we had relocated the business, renamed it, all new people. And I'll never forget the day that the investor partner came to me in the new building, walked in the front door and saw what we'd created. And he said, "Now I feel like I own something of value."
Mhm.
And so that was really
Mhm.
impactful for me. Like I thought, okay, so from an outsider, as the owner, he felt like he now had a business that was sustainable and would have some real value. And they continued to run it. I ultimately stepped out of there. They continued to run it and grow it. And so
Mhm.
I have no idea how it ultimately turned out, except that I know that initially, in the first probably 18 to 24 months, that investor put a lot more money in this business than would have been necessary. Okay, so that's an important thing to understand, is that I think the key takeaway for me, and you've heard me say this to other dealers, is like we recommend in the space that capital be introduced with some really specific parameters.
Mhm.
And that has to do with, if you're a dealer and I'm an investor, if I provide you capital, I'm okay with funding contracts and earning assets. We have assets that are attached to that, as long as we have some um, safeguards in place to verify that those are legitimate performing assets,
Mhm.
then that's a safe investment for me. We can make that work and we can build a nice business. The question becomes, what other money is required to get this business off the ground?
Mhm.
Right. And so that money should be handled differently. The money that goes into the earning assets, that can include inventory too, sometimes includes real estate, but I'm really talking about the primary way to fund a buy here, pay here operation, in my experience, is to fund these contracts, earning assets, in a way that has some appropriate safeguards built into it.
Mhm.
And now you can invest more comfortably and have it work out well for both parties. For all
Mhm.
parties, the business can grow. But I think that's the thing that we just see too often, is that, and you were there when we had another client, we'll tell that story another day, but when I basically suggested, based on all these years of experience, there's some things that we're going to highly recommend, like, strongly recommend,
We
right?
never say you should
You
or
have
you
to,
have
or
to,
whatever. We just say,
except for safeguards rule.
yeah, we're
Okay.
advisors. I mean, we're advisors and coaches. And we
Yeah.
say, based on our experience, we're here to help mitigate risk. And we we strongly recommend that you do this. And we've had seen
Mhm.
dealers say,
Well,
we
and
got,
that's
yeah.
where that when you talked about that one of the pieces that really create um it's that ego piece. I know better.
Hmm.
Yeah, what you're yeah, that ego piece is, I think, one of those that we've watched just since I've stepped in a bunch of different times, where it's like, oh no, we've got that covered. Oh no, we figured that out. We did it all on our own. We've got our own understanding, or whatever. And then we just kind of sit back and watch things
Yeah.
start to go a little bit
And it's
sideways.
always
Yeah.
difficult. I mean, it's part of anybody who's done coaching, been an advisor, mentor.
Mhm.
It's natural that clients don't follow every recommendation. You
Yeah.
put out 10 recommendations and maybe they adopt 6 or whatever it looks like. It's like they don't all adopt all of them. And that's okay. It's not that in buy here, pay here, there's more than one way to be.
Oh,
So, but there are some things that we strongly advise, because we're trying to, and when we come in, we always say, look, we know we got principals involved, we got investors and managers, and we got people involved. And so there are human beings involved. But if we come in and we try to, let's first focus on the success of the business. If we think about the entity, the C Corp, the LLC, let's think about the success of that operation. And now through doing that, we can, obviously we would expect that success of that operation can transfer to you as principals. Then that helps me to just focus on, I'm not trying to serve investor here, principal one versus principal two. I'm trying to serve the
general
entity,
manager, sales team,
trying to
whatever.
serve the
Yeah.
entity, because that then serves the principals. When the
Hmm.
entity is successful, obviously the principals benefit. So we're
That's
trying to first
sustainable.
do that right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why this particular story, when we're advising, we're trying to say, look, the success of the operation, the health of the operation long term would be well served if you would create some structure at the outset that places very specific parameters around, in this case, if Jason had said, I will bring investment to the company under this set of guidelines.
Mhm.
They didn't have that. And
Mhm.
so regrettably, that investor tied up a lot more cash in that business than would have been necessary had they stayed on that. Now, their working capital and other costs required to get the business off the ground that aren't
Mhm.
related to those assets, sure, but make that a separate understanding and
Mhm.
keep that limited. Put that in your business plan. And then now you can, if you're fortunate to do 50% more sales volume than you anticipated, and the investors got the funds, and then you fund that, and everybody can get on board with putting dollars. Because generally speaking, in the approach that you've heard me talk about, for every dollar in this scenario, had that structure been in place, for every
Mhm.
dollar that Jason put in, there
Mhm.
would have been $2 of performing contracts.
Mhm.
Okay. So when you have that, everybody can get excited about putting money behind that.
Oh yeah, and I think that when I mentioned that we've even had capital providers, it's like, yep,
Sure.
that will help mitigate a lot of
Hmm.
risk. A lot of even our capital providers will offer more, a larger percentage, which actually can put a dealership at risk if
Right.
if other things go sideways or
Sure.
whatever. And I think with this, with the structure of capital coming in, it's the same
Hmm.
kind of thing with the capital provider as
Sure.
well. And then I love that you have a well, one of the indicators of having a good structure is, could you double
Right.
your charge-offs?
Hmm.
And if you can and still stay in the black, then you're in a good spot.
Hmm.
If you can't, then you need to rethink the structure of your capital.
Yeah, and so leverage is part of that. But what we're really seeing in this particular scenario, it was private money. There was
Mhm.
no lender involved. So the private money is like, had we adopted some of the practices that you see a lender, like,
Mhm.
if you go to some of these major lenders, who's actually going to provide some sort of revolving line of credit, they're going to be very specific covenants in there about what's the definition of a qualified asset.
Mhm.
They're going to have borrowing base limits set on certain things, based on delinquency and these kind of things. So, and delinquency even can be manipulated. So we got to make sure we write some stuff in there that
So
guards
are
against
you
that.
encouraging just regular investors, not but a regular investor, that there are certain things we should be, or that we strongly advise that you be looking at a lot like what capital providers do? It's like that, just to make sure that things are running smoothly and all of
The
that.
the truth is, yes, I will be recommending that, strongly recommending that every damn time.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the ways that we can, because we're also thinking when we do extend beyond
Mhm.
the actual entity and we think about the principles involved, we're also thinking about how how can we preserve the relationship?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's family. You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so we're also
Yeah.
thinking about how do we preserve the relationship so that it works well. When the business works well, everybody's happy, and that's all, the whole relationship works great. So we're also thinking ahead to how to, so that, to answer your question, yes, that is a structured thing that we will recommend every time when capital is introduced from the outside, private or otherwise. We need to make sure we've got a good set of rules, good set of understanding about what is qualified asset, what are the circumstances, and if the
Mhm.
portfolio is not performing well enough and we don't show to have enough earning assets, then let's stop and talk about that as partners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's fix that, because
Yeah.
if we can, suddenly we're over advanced on our own portfolio, if it's private money, then let's stop and fix that. Let's figure out, or let's get out of the business, right? So we shouldn't have those off ramps even written into the understanding where if it's not working, why are we going to continue to fund it? And you've heard me say in other
Yeah.
contexts, we don't sell our way out of that situation. There's other things that typically have to be resolved. We don't just, keep selling, keep doing the same thing we've been
It
doing.
would not. Well, you're not talking about like selling off the contract, but like selling more units. So
Yeah.
if I sell more units, it'll resolve that. It's like, but if you have an agreement right now with a passive or an investor of some kind, and
Hmm.
it's not working, that doesn't it gives you a great opportunity to come up with a new agreement.
Right.
And so it's not,
that's right.
it's not all or nothing. It's like, if it's not working, come up with a new agreement.
So that kind of ties to what we say, but you draft a written understanding, and it's our understanding for today. And it's our understanding until we replace it with a new understanding. But it's like, this is our understanding. This is how we operate. If we're not functioning well within that understanding, we have to sit down as partners and sort it out and figure out what needs to happen next. Because I think this whole thing, we're going to do a lot of these dealer stories. And one of the themes that's going to come out of that is going to be why you're hearing me bring this thing in March. This live stream day is going to be around this thing of how do we make our business more sustainable, right? There's all these words that you hear me use around this. Like, how do we make the business perform well? How do we verify that it's performing well? And then when it's performing well, how do we make sure it performs well when we're not in the building? Right. And then how do we grow it, and all these things? How do we capitalize it in a way that's smart and we can make sure that we're still in a healthy footing 3 years and 10 years from now? Well, there are answers to that. And I'm not the only one with the answers. We're going to bring all the smart people.
Yeah. There's a lot of different options for the answers, but there are answers.
Sure.
And there are very specific things that people can do. And there are very specific things that most of the people that we talk about will warn people,
right?
Will guard, ask them to guard against certain things that
Sure.
that could be something that would ultimately make their dealership fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why we felt like we want to take these stories out there confidentially, do them in a way that's anonymous and change the name so people know exactly who we're talking about, because we don't want to compromise anybody's privacy or tell their story without permission. But we're basically just saying, look, there are lessons out there from 20 years of traveling and being in more than half the states in the country and finance companies and dealerships. I always say I learn as much as I teach. When I go out there, I see stuff, and you're obviously trying to bring that information to people so that we can help spare them the same, challenges. Gosh, those people went through a really painful experience financially, emotionally, like it was a painful thing.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to spare people, and we know there are some things that you can put in place that will decrease the likelihood that you'll find yourself in that uncomfortable place with a lender or a partner or a family member. And so this is why we wanted to come and tell these stories. And like I say, that event in March, I think people are going to see, we started out calling it a blue sky event and enterprise value. It's all these things. It's like, how do you create value in your business so that it functions well? You've got all the right structure. You've got a chance to have a business that has enterprise value and will function well when you're not there, has a chance to grow, keeps all the partners, happy to be invested and involved in the business. So it's totally possible in this business. It starts with these basic kind of mitigating factors that we certainly want to make sure people get familiar with. And we're happy to just share that information everywhere. Like this is just basics. And, we obviously need to figure out how to do it. Like, what are the parameters? That has to be worked out with the partners, what makes sense for everybody. But there is some hard math that drives some of this stuff. And so we can all hide from this and that, but we can't hide from math. Right. So
and math is your bank account. Math is, it's
right. So anyway, I think we can probably wrap up
the
there.
pluses and the minuses. Just if you are, just make sure you have on your calendar, March 30th is this all day long event. We are doing it differently than we did the last one in our pilot event, which was the town hall in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. This one is not going to be live broadcast through all of our social media channels. This will be done through Eventbrite, and in order to be able to attend that you will need to be able to, you'll need to register to attend. And so it is out there right now on Eventbrite. You can get access to the what's coming up on BuyHerePayHereNationTV.com or BHPHNationTV.com. And we haven't started marketing, and when we get some of the marketing things done, there will be some discounts available and all of that for registering for that. And so it's going to be a really fantastic high value. This is high value.
So you got all the experts. I mean,
Yeah.
I could go on and on. We could list them off. They're going to be at the website. You can see all the people,
Yeah.
but so many people.
And we're still adding more to the contributors to who has agreed to come and participate in this. But
doesn't matter if it's capital, financial, operational, all those people are going to be there to help answer
absolutely.
these big questions.
So it's going to be a really great event for anyone who is a dealer out there, or even an investor out there. Someone
absolutely.
who is a private investor into the space. So make sure you keep it on your calendar. March 30th, it will be an all day long. We're going to be doing it at a studio in Salt Lake City. And also don't forget, coming up Tuesday is our next webinar and our monthly series, and it will be about story branding, sort of. I mean, it's like how to tell your story, what's your story, how to wrap that in your marketing and reach more people and connect with more people. So we've got Troy Shear from NIEDA, Dave Murray will be there. We've got a couple of dealers joining us, including Gordy Tormolen agreed to join us on that webinar. So Gordy's the president-elect of NIEDA, and he's got a lot of experience with marketing over the years. So we definitely want to hear Gordy's contributions to that conversation. But that's at 7:30 Eastern on Tuesday evening. Yep. So, all right. Well, again, it's Friday. And so I hope you all have a fantastic weekend coming up, and it's collection day and all of that. So it should be pretty busy in all of our listeners' dealerships today. I hope you have a great day, and then we will see you on Monday. Just to continue the story.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, guys. Thanks so much for joining.